longevity, anti-aging, fasting, inflammation. We've got it all covered today. We have a phenomenal guest, Dr. Daniel Pompa, who's an expert in cellular health, longevity, detoxification, inflammation, you name it, he's the expert. Dr. Pompa, thanks for being my guest.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Love all these topics.
Now, you have an amazing story yourself, kind of from poor health to this amazingly handsome, vibrant, physically healthy guy. So what is your story?
Well, it started back in 1999, and I just didn't know what was wrong. I was trying to find answers like most people, right? Fatigue. I thought I was training too much and working too hard because I was running a very busy practice. I was riding. For fun, I was doing bike races. Like I needed that, right? But I was into it. I was riding 250, 300 miles a week, two young boys at the time. And like I said, a very busy practice. So fatigue sounded like, yeah, I just overtraining. Cut back on the biking, chilled out for a couple weeks. Didn't work. I was worse, not better. Took a month off, worse, not better. Then it started with headaches, weird gut problems, sound sensitivity, insomnia, panic attacks. I mean, bizarre stuff. It just kept escalating.
Were you eating good at the time? I mean, you're exercising.
I was. I mean, I practice what I preach. I always have. And
so you were doing all the right things, but you were still getting that fatigue.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And so, I mean, like most people, I was like tracking down my adrenals, my thyroid, trying everything. And, I'm able to read the literature, and I'm an executor. I do it. And so, but it wasn't working. Certain things might have gotten a little better, but I wasn't better. And frankly, most things were getting worse. And I was online one day, and I found Mad Hatter's disease. Do you remember what that is? It's the people making felt hats are known as Mad Hatters. Okay. I was a Mad Hatter. That's all I knew. All I knew is I had all those symptoms, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me, right? I had like this weird, uncontrollable anger, the sound sensitivity. I mean, all of it, personality change. I mean, everything. That was me. Weird anxiety, brain fog, couldn't think through. My photographic memory went to like, I would go in the closet and be like, what am I in here for? Right. And then I couldn't even pick out clothes. It was like, I'd just stare at the shirts and be like, I can't make a choice. Anyways, so many weird things. Matter of fact, I'm often reminded of certain things when I'm talking to other people. I'm like, oh my God, I had that too, because you forget. But needless to say, looking for answers, I was running still a very busy practice, but I was embarrassed, honestly. I was like ashamed, and like, because I was the guy, because your question, I was the guy that ate well. I was the guy that took care of himself. I did practice what I preached. So for me to get sick, it was embarrassing. I even hid it from my family, like my sisters and my parents, until I couldn't hide it anymore. But anyways, all that to say, I didn't have Mad Hatter's disease. Okay, so I went and got a blood test, and it came back no mercury. I didn't finish the point. Mad Hatters were mercury toxic because they were using mercury as part of the process.
Yep.
And so I thought I was mercury toxic. They said I wasn't, according to the test. That day I went to the head of toxicology at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh. I ran every test that I could think of, and $5,000 worth of tests that I didn't have insurance for all came back. And he looked at me and said, "You're healthier than me, son. That's not what you want to hear."
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd have told me I have cancer, Kevin, I would have been like, okay, I'm going straight after it. I know what it is now, or whatever, right? But I got nothing. And then it was a year or so later, I was working with a very bright endocrinologist. And because I was trying to figure out my thyroid, even my blood work was normal, but I had every symptom of thyroid, and I know why that is now, but I didn't know then. But he said, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I think you focused in on that because of my weird body temperatures. But I said, yeah, I thought so too. Did that. He said, wrong test. Blood test only shows acute if you're being acutely poisoned. If it's chronic, it would be in your tissue, blah, blah, blah. So I did a different test, and I had a very odd high levels of a lot of different heavy metals. So that put me on the search and I asked the question, where do you think I got it from? He said, did you have any dental work done around the time this happened? And I did. I had two silver fillings removed and 50% mercury, which was going right into my brain, the center of the brain, the pituitary hypothalamus.
Yeah.
I literally found that study. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what's been happening to me. It's like, no wonder I couldn't balance my adrenals and thyroid, my hormones, right? But anyways, and so that led me on a long, long stretch of learning how to get this stuff out of my brain. And everything I teach today came out of that.
Is based on heavy metal toxicity and detoxing your body from those heavy metals, right?
Yeah, in my work goes beyond heavy metals. When people get sick, Kevin, there's always this perfect storm, meaning three weather fronts come together. If you remember the George Clooney movie, and boom, catastrophic storm. And that's when the gene gets triggered. That's when you typically get the weird symptoms or the diagnosis. So I think part of my other storm too was I was living in a low grade moldy home at the time. My family was fine, but I was challenged here, and it was more of a challenge that I could do. And I think all the physical training I was doing didn't help. So that was my perfect storm. But I deal with neurotoxic illness in general when people don't know what's wrong. Neurotoxins today, what I went through back then was definitely more rare. Today, people are going through the brain fog, the anxiety, the weird gut problems, the odd symptoms, the weird aches and pains. I mean, so much of this is prevalent today. Of course, the fatigue, but it is still the same cause, a buildup of toxins over time that accumulate in your tissues, specifically your cells. But I always say that, like, imagine all of us have a bucket, right? I call it the stress bucket. Physical, chemical, or emotional stressors will fill that bucket. One day it overflows. That was the day I got the two fillings drilled out, and that mercury vapor pushed my bucket over the edge. People tell a different story of an emotional stress can push that bucket over, but what's in that stress, the body doesn't know the difference of physical, chemical, or emotional stress. Genetically, some of us has bigger buckets, smaller buckets, the ability to handle it. But my bucket overflowed that day. And how I got my life back is emptying it correctly. And that's the work that I do.
Now, from all the people that you've seen, is heavy metal toxicity prevalent?
It's very prevalent. And again, it's typically a combination of heavy metals. Look, if you look at what happens in utero, our first exposures are from our mom. There's a study called the DRASH study. It's a German study. It was the first one that I read, but the number of silver fillings in mom's mouth is proportional to how much mercury accumulates in the baby's brain in utero. That was an autopsy study. So that's very accurate. So it wasn't like they were doing these, odd tests and making up their own results. That was biopsy. Very accurate. So those fillings leach mercury, the life of the filling, despite what the ADA says. And they've changed their position several times. We're still one of the only countries in the world that don't have bans around these fillings, right? And if you complain too much about it, as a dentist, they might just take your license. But these fillings absolutely leach mercury into the brain. That vapor crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's one exposure. Today, oh, and by the way, the number one lead causative factor of lead is mom as well. So lead is stored in the bone. Your parents, we grew up, Kevin, in the lead generation, meaning it wasn't until 1978 where they really started trying to get it out, right? Of the gasoline, it was leaded gasoline at that, the paint. I mean, lead was everywhere. That lead, most of it accumulated in the bones. And when a woman is pregnant, it's very normal because of estrogen shifts to lose bone. It's normal, but out comes the lead. So as an example of that, one of the lectures I do, I show my wife's lead level because she had major hormone challenges that came out of nowhere. And we realized, oh my gosh, she's going in the same direction her mother was, and her mother had lead toxicity. I measured my wife, it was off the chart. I measured my kids, they were all off the chart without any exposure. They got it all from her in utero. So because it's stored in the bone, it comes out during pregnancy into the baby. So we start life literally accumulating certain heavy metals. Now, today, you have a lot of other new exposures. For example, they use lead I'm sorry, they use aluminum in jet fuel to make it more efficient. It's part of this chemical concoction that they're putting in jet fuel. It's about money. I don't know that they're not doing it evilly. I'm not starting a conspiracy here, but it literally is part of the formula. But here's the problem: aluminum is falling down into our food supply and water supply, and aluminum and mercury together have a much higher lethal dose value. So the levels of aluminum are extreme today. And even when, look, aluminum is the second, I believe it's the second most abundant element in the soil. But when it's connected into what it's in the soil, it's not getting into our water and food supply. But when you hit it with acid rain, now it can disconnect and now it ends up in the food supply. And we're bringing it from the airplanes down, and also in certain areas, the acid rain levels are separating it. So, look, not to mention, people wrap food, fatty and hot food, in aluminum foil. Big mistake. Okay, no doubt about it, it's leaching out of that foil. Don't do that. Don't let food touch foil. Simple as that. Deodorants, antiperspirants still have aluminum in them. Don't do that. It's being absorbed into your body. So we have all of these exposures. So I just talked about mercury and aluminum and lead. There's others.
And there's a lot more too.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we can assume then that if you just take 100 people and test them properly, not just a blood test, but test them, the tissue properly, you would say, okay, you have too much heavy metals, you have too many heavy metals. Everybody has this, which is one of the causes of a whole host of health and emotional conditions, right?
Oh, there's no doubt. Look, it's what gets in to the brain that becomes the bigger challenge. It's a neurotoxin, the biggest nerve. That means nerve toxin, right? Neurotoxin. The biggest nerve in the body is right here. So, and your nerves have this myelin sheath around them. That's a fatty little sheath. Think of a wire and that the plastic around a wire, okay, that protects it. That's your myelin, but that's made of fat. These toxins go right in, especially into the brain, and that's what heavy metals do. And yes, they are absolutely causative for neurodegenerative conditions. You could name a bunch, right? From Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, dementia, all of those can absolutely be associated in some way with pieces of literature that show that it drives inflammation in those brain cells and drives different functional problems in certain parts of the brain, which will lead to a certain diagnosis depending on what parts of the brain it affects. Look, when it gets into the pituitary, your pituitary controls most of your hormones, right? That's what sends a signal to your thyroid, to your adrenals, and it regulates your hormones. So when many people are downstream trying to balance their hormones, when the control tower is poisoned, that's a problem. And studies show that it accumulates there.
So the question then is, how do you detox? Because when I wrote the book, Natural Cures, they don't want you to know about, it sold 50 million copies. One of the things I say in there is do a heavy metal detox. I wrote that book 20 years ago, so there's a lot more data today. What is a way today for someone to get the heavy metals out of their system?
It's not what you think, which is a pet peeve of mine for the last 20 years of teaching doctors. It's not so easy to just sit in a sauna like they want it to be, or a foot bath, or the 10-day cleanse. I have people tell me all the time, oh, I thought I had heavy metals. I did a cleanse. Oh, yeah. Oh, it was long. It was 3 months. Okay. To get heavy metals out of your brain, there's a proper way to do it, but it's years, not months. And it's something that someone has to do themselves. You can't go just get chelation, because chelation, there's problems there. If you had an acute poisoning, it's the appropriate treatment. It can come in with a water-soluble chelator like DMPS, EDTA, DMSA, and it can grab and pull it out, and it can save your life. Now, if you're chronically exposed, where it's bioaccumulated in the tissue like the brain, those types of chelators, they don't work by themselves, because you put one in, a chelator, you get an IV, and then you go home and you're pulling metal out. You could measure it in your urine, there's no doubt. However, when the chelator goes away, now these metals start to redistribute and resettle, and people get worse, not better, when they do IVs with chronic mercury exposure. So you can't do that either. Now, I teach how to use chelators orally, transdermally, maybe even suppositories. There's different ways of utilizing chelators besides IV. But the reason why IV isn't good is because you can't take it often enough to prevent that redistribution. Meaning, if you took oral DMPS or EDTA, you can keep the level in the blood up so you can stay on it long enough so when you stop, you don't get a lot of redistribution. So, but those things have to be taken in their half-life. For example, DMPS, it's about a 10-hour half-life. So taking it 3 times a day, every 8 hours, is appropriate. The reason why is because it keeps that blood level up. If you go beyond the half-life, the blood level starts coming down, you start getting redistribution. So number one, chelators have to be taken in their half-life. Number two, you have to take them long enough to when you do stop, you've at least emptied the load, the easy to get toxins circulating low enough that you don't get redistribution. However, they will start moving from higher concentrations in the brain and other tissue to lower, and eventually you have to do another cycle. So detox is cycled. Maybe it's 3 days on, 4 days off. Maybe it's 7 days on, 7 days off. The length of the cycle is determined by, what your body tells you. I'm saying all this not because I'm trying to, lose people here, but I know I am, meaning that there's a lot of science around detoxification. What I've been teaching for 20 years is real detox is a cellular problem. So you have to fix what's broken. Because we're so inundated with toxins, not just heavy metals, many types of toxins. Look at plastic today and pesticides and all these things that have just gone like this, in our food supply, water supply, and our personal care products. They're challenging our detox pathways. Our cells are designed to get rid of toxins day in, day out. If they didn't, Kevin, we'd be dead. Simple as that. Every gene you have that's in that cell, because that's where your DNA is, would be triggered because of the toxic buildup in the cell. What's happening is your detox pathways, people's detox pathways, are getting exhausted in the cell to the point where now you start accumulating toxins in the cell. Now you have something called cellular inflammation. Now you can't even get your supplements, your nutrition in the cell. And as you make cellular energy, it's not leaving. So you're making toxins that are building up in the cell. It's kind of like if you burn wood when you make energy, right? Burn wood in a fireplace. You're making energy. But what do you make? You make waste. The smoke comes off, and you better have that damper open. If someone closes that damper, that smoke pours into the house. Okay, we die of the smoke, the toxicity of the smoke, not the flames. That's what's happening in people's cells. Toxins build up in and around the cell, driving cellular inflammation, and the toxins get trapped in the cell. And now we have a new problem. So all my process has been teaching doctors how to upregulate those pathways. And that's step one, Kevin, getting the pathways working. But here's the problem, is you start moving toxins from the cell. This is where you use chelators to grab them, to move them out of the body. And then we even use gut binders because a lot of the toxins can be brought to the liver, binds up with bile, and it can be recirculated. So we use gut binders to pull them out, chelators around the cell to pull them out, but we have to fix that. That's a brief example of what I've been teaching for a long time.
So this is why the word cellular health is really the key.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to get the cell healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to draw a little example of that. A little glare. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Let me better pen here. I'll use this. So, okay. So the cell, I'm not using that. The cell is where everything happens. Matter of fact, I can make an argument that this cell membrane, so this is a cell, we have 50 to 70 trillion of these. On every cell, we have hormone receptors. This is very important, especially today, because people are trying to just take hormones to get healthy. And again, if it were only that easy, we'd have all these people going, oh my gosh, I'm losing weight now. I feel so much better. No, they feel better sometimes in the beginning when they take hormones, but then it doesn't work any longer. Okay, there's a reason. And this is also why my blood work was normal, even though I had thyroid dysfunction. Hormones, and I'll use thyroid as an example. I can use insulin. I could use estrogen, okay, or I could use testosterone. So there's my examples. These hormones have to attach to these receptors. And when they do, they get their message in the cell or themselves in the cell, and then we feel normal. When hormones work in the cell, all's well. Insulin, right? When it gets in the cell, we make normal energy, we burn fat for energy, all good as well. Thyroid hormone too, as very, very important how it works in the mitochondria where we make energy. And when thyroid hormone's normal, we have normal energy. That's why one of the symptoms of thyroid problems is just no energy. And then your hair starts thinning, and then you can get anxiety and brain fog, all because this hormone, okay, let's say like me, I went and got my blood, that's an artery, and I went and got my blood levels checked, and they checked for hormone TSH and T3, and they were normal. But what they didn't tell me was that even though my blood work was normal, I had something blocking these receptors. So I was hormone resistant. I was resistant to my thyroid hormone. I can tell you I was resistant to testosterone too and some other hormones because I had no sex drive anymore. I had all those symptoms. But the point is this resistance is the issue. So the better question is what's causing this epidemic of hormone resistance today? Well, I'll tell you what it is. The number one, there's a few, but the number one cause is toxins. They come in and they attach to this fatty membrane and also inside the cell. They drive inflammation and they blunt the receptors to the hormones. Now, you can finally go to your doctor and go, oh, your TSH is elevated, your T3 is low. Here, take these hormones. And you come back in 2 months and you go, oh, your blood works great. You must feel so much better. Well, not really. Maybe this is better, but I'm still not sleeping. I still have this because they forced your blood levels of hormones up, but they didn't deal with this problem right here.
So it's not being assimilated into the cell.
Exactly. Because if your hormones can't dock on these receptors, then I don't care how many hormones you take, you will not feel better and nothing works. So that means you're trying all these things and nothing works, right? So I can have $1,000 cell phone in my hand, but it still has to connect to that receptor over there, that cell phone tower. If something blocks like a big cement wall or cellular inflammation, doesn't matter if I have a cell phone. It's useless, just like the hormones or taking hormones until it can dock and communicate with that receptor, get its message in the cell, and we feel well.
And everybody today is toxic. If you drink anything, there's toxins in the water, correct?
That's right.
There's toxins in the air.
That's right.
And
exactly.
All the food, there's toxins in all the food.
Which, you know what, Kevin, and you're right what you're saying. But you know what that does to people, humans, including perhaps you and I? We tend to say it's everywhere, so what can we do about it? And then we do nothing.
Well, I get dirty every day, but I take a shower every day as well.
That's true.
Right?
That's why I still do detox, even though I got my life back by this.
Exactly. So I wash my car when it gets dirty, and I don't say, oh, well, it's going to get dirty again, so why bother washing it? But if you're putting toxins in your body every day, and no matter how clean we eat, that's going to happen. We should be cleaning the inside on a regular basis as well, right?
Especially today. And that's the point, right? And again, listen, I am all for, we have to minimize what comes in, right? We do, right? So if there's a bathtub upstairs and it's overflowing and causing all this damage, right? Like equivalent to our symptoms that we're getting, one of the first things we're going to do is stop the water from coming in. Well, we can't stop the toxins from coming in, but we can slow them down, right? Meaning we could choose to drink out of glass instead of plastic. When the new study that just came out, a teaspoon of plastic in autopsies of people's brains and our testicles, our penises, and every tissue in the body, in our cells, plastic. What about forever chemicals that people are still cooking out of, the Teflon pans? Like, oh my gosh, these things should have been banned years ago when they realized they cause cancer, but they're not, and people are still using them. And every time that gas is going into you and your family, And matter of fact, it causes headaches, and you don't even associate it with the pan you just heated up and cooked in, right? And I mentioned the aluminum. Well, what about what personal care products you're using that are loaded with hormone disruptors, the fragrances you're plugging in? It's like, so my point is this, you can minimize what's coming into the bathtub. You can't stop it today, but minimize it while we're opening up the drain and fixing the hair clogs.
So reduce, you can't eliminate, reduce as best you can the toxins you're putting in, and then regularly cleanse or detox via different methods. And let's talk about one method that you discuss, fasting. Yes, no, good, bad?
Well, look, I've taught fasting almost longer than anyone I know in the space. I got into fasting in the 90s when it was me and some natural hygiene society people.
Hold on. Did you know a guy named Dr. Pavro Arola?
No,
because he wrote a book that I read back in the 70s called The Miracle of Juice Fasting.
Yeah, right. Fasting has been around for eons, but the thing is, of course, I mean, Herbert Shelton's books, they're here somewhere in my office. I mean, it's like I was fascinated by this, right? The reason is because fasting harnesses innate intelligence, meaning that intelligence God put in all of us that heals the body, right? It's like, so fasting harnesses that, and you get like major things. I have so many fasting books here. I've been into fasting so long, but I started teaching it because people just weren't utilizing it correctly, right? And that was way back when. So there was nobody into it. Now today, fasting has become so popular, but here's the problem. It's brought a lot of issues. People are fasting too much. So now I go to these conferences and I'm the guy going, wait a minute, hold on. The feast is as important as the fast. Meaning, if you fast too much, fasting is a stress, and that's how it works, right? Because stress can be good if you adapt to stress. The premise is called hormesis. But people are fasting too much with intermittent fasting. I intermittent fast, but you have to still feast. Otherwise, the body will think it's starving. Right. And it will start tapping into muscle. You will lower your metabolism. So now a lot of people are into fasting, but again, they're making some big mistakes in fasting. We can talk about some of these mistakes.
Now, when you say fasting, because that word is, I think, used as a misnomer most times. Yes. People say, I'm fasting, and then they're eating avocados. It's like, no, you're not fasting. You're on a modified diet, because fasting initially is water. That was a fast, and then there was a juice fast where you took only 2 or 3 ounces of juice diluted with 10 ounces of water 3 times a day. And so you got a little bit of nutrient in. But people then modified it and started, having liquid diets, and they're calling it a fast. So when you use the word fasting, what are you describing? You talking about a real true fast where you're not eating anything and you're just drinking water and maybe an herbal tea? Or are you talking about a modified fast?
So there's several types of fasting, to your point. Today, intermittent fasting is popular, meaning you eat in a 4 to 6 hour window, daily intermittent fasting, where you fast through the night. Maybe you skip breakfast and eat at first meal at 2 o'clock. Okay. People call that fasting. All right. Daily intermittent fasting category. Okay. There's pure water fasting, which I'm a big fan of. To me, it's the easy. Hey, look at that. I just set off the fireworks. I
had that silly thing on my, on mine as well. He'll come back.
Yeah, that's crazy. When you do certain things.
It's some default that they have on it. Yeah.
I know. I had someone try to turn it off, or at least tell me how, and I'm too tech illiterate. But anyway, so there is a pure water fast where you just have water, right? Probably the purest form of fasting.
And you should be doing colonics at the same time, or enemas when you're doing a fast to get some of the toxins out.
Certain things you can do to help, especially if you're very toxic, help mitigate some of that, right?
Yeah.
Then there's what is known now as a partial fast. Well, I found partial fasting, a Frenchman, Albert Mazère, who was taking people in long fasts, very unhealthy people, and realized when you start feeding them again, they actually start to heal again in this healing process, right? And they're able to go longer. That was considered a partial fast. Very sick people, he partial fasted them even before he would pure water fast them. A partial fast is defined as, depending on body size, anywhere between 500 to 1,000 calories. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more. It could even go up to 1,200. But so caloric in a day. That's calories in a day. And then under 20 grams of protein. Again, body size matters there. So when you do a partial fast, you still get some autophagy. And what that means is your body's getting rid of bad cells as an energy source while you're fasting.
And there you
Every
go
time
again.
I
Yes,
move my head,
and we have a celebration.
yes, exactly, because you can eat again eventually. Okay. Anyway, so I cannot put my hands near my chest, otherwise it thinks I'm celebrating something. All right. But so a partial fast, Walter Longo is an Italian scientist who made partial fasting more popular today. And partial fasting works. It is appropriate for many people who've never fasted. And again, the key is you have to keep your calories down, your carbohydrates down, but usually that's pretty easy. But your protein, if you eat too much protein, you will not go into autophagy. So partial fast. Then there's dry fast, where you don't
Yep.
do food or water. And dry fasting is amazing. As a matter of fact, you get 3-to-1 autophagy, meaning that because your body needs water, it will break down bad cells very quickly. So you get more autophagy. And again, autophagy, that means your body's getting rid of bad cells. Your innate intelligence is so smart that it knows not to break down for energy good cells. So literally, it breaks down the bad cells. We call them senescent. The science calls them senescent cells. We call them zombie cells oftentimes. These are cells that live too long. They cause inflammation. They cause trouble in your body. They're like bad guys, right? So during a fast, your body, this is the best part of the detox, is your body gets rid of those bad cells. So that happens in partial fasting and it happens in water fasting, but in dry fasting, 3-to-1, you're getting rid of these bad cells
How long?
because
How many days can you do a dry fast? Obviously, you have to drink water at some point.
want to hear a true story.
Tell me.
I just, I was at Dave Asprey's Biohacking conference lecturing, and I ran in to one of a client of mine from many years ago, and he went up to me. He owns Kavaplex. He started a Kava company, but he was so sick that, and he interviewed me there, and we told the story, retold the story, so it's fresh in my mind. But he was so sick that he was basically living off of 4 or 5 foods because he was that sensitive. He was drinking, only able to drink one water, Mountain Valley spring water. Okay, that was the only water he was able to drink. And then he got down, he was on surviving on Klonopin, and then it was like he was trying to cut it off, and then all of a sudden he couldn't eat anything and he couldn't drink water. His father, John, brought him to the hospital and they put an IV in him, almost killed him because he went anaphylactic. They sent him home to die. And John called me and said, Dan, what do we do? He won't eat. We can't feed him, or we can't even give him a sip of water without him reacting. I said, his innate intelligence will tell you when when to give him water again. He went 12 days without food or water. 12 days. So every day I was checking on him, and I was getting nervous. I'm like, oh man. I mean, it's not like he had another choice because they sent him home to die, right? But day 12, and he said, well, how am I going to know? I said, he'll get extremely thirsty and he'll want water. And that's exactly what happened. He started drinking water and everything was fine. He said, what about eating? I said, same thing. He'll get very hungry and he'll desire food. That took about 23 days. So before he started eating again, and then he started eating foods again. And today he's a new person, but that was part of, then we took him into my detox after we got him to that point. But the point is that the body will survive on this autophagy. His body was getting water by just crushing bad cells. Innate intelligence knew what to do. It knew what to do to save his life.
That's very interesting because when I read the book by Pavro Arola back in the 70s, The Miracle of Juice Fasting, the thing that got me to fast, and my first fast was 21 days, was exactly what you just said. Because I thought, I'm healthy, I'm 20 years old, what do I need this for? I'm not toxic. But the idea of getting rid of and flushing these, quote, bad cells, these either sick or diseased or bad cells that you call them, and getting in the body's innate intelligence, we're gonna burn these first.
Yeah,
You know, we're not going to
exactly.
go after the good, healthy cells or the muscle. We're going to get rid of the bad stuff first. That's what really sold me on doing that fast.
I was teaching a seminar, maybe it was Atlanta, but anyways, I was teaching it. It was to doctors, and um, one of my doctors I was training said, "Hey, my patient wants to come to the seminar." He was on 121 days of just water. Now, he was morbidly obese. Before he started the fast, he was on 14 different medications. 14. His doctors basically were like, yeah, you want to fast, go ahead, but your nutrition is so poor, you'll never, this fast is going to be horrible. We're going to measure all your nutrition markers, the best we can. And they supported him for the fast. What they were most amazed by, not that he came off of every medication, by the way, to their amazement as this fast went on. Okay. As a matter of fact, they had to take him off the medications because the symptoms he was getting became about the medication,
Right.
and he intuitively started stopping them and feeling better and better and better. Okay. So came off the medication, but all of his nutrition markers got better. Every one of them. They were just like, how is this? See, they came from a different mindset, right? It's like every one of them, because his body was just crushing cells as is assimilation, and the utilization of the nutrition was getting better and better as the fast went on. But it was interesting because I was I was teaching on how to know when to break an extended fast, and I talked about increase in thirst or hunger, and the tongue. When you started, it might turn white, it might go to green, black. I mean, we've seen it all, but then it'll turn back pink. Anyways, I was kind of giving the signs of how to know when to break the fast. He said, I'm getting those. I think I'm, about ready to have to break my fast. I think he went 5 more days and then he broke his fast. But I mean, extraordinary. I think the longest fast is a Scottishman, and I think it's 352 days, something like that. So.
Wow. Well, let's talk about pharmaceutical drugs as a toxin, because there's so many people today, specifically in America.
Are you comfortable talking about this, Kevin?
Yeah, I love this subject, because a lot of people think that in order for me to be healthy, I need my medication. I have to take my Lipitor or my statin. I have to take my blood pressure medication. I have to take this drug every day for the rest of my life. And that's how I'm going to keep and maintain my health. But they're very toxic and they build up in the cell, correct?
Look, I believe I'll preface this by saying I'm not telling anybody to come off a medication. I'm not telling anyone to start a medication. Okay, so we're saying that right off the bat. That said, it is the number one killer in America. So I mean, I think it was posted as number 3 or 4, but when you put in everything together, it is number one. So
Well, I had the former director of the FDA when I wrote my book Natural Cures say, and he showed me the numbers, that more people die from pharmaceutical drugs than from the diseases they're being used to treat.
yeah. And Kevin, I am not even going to say there's a time and a place is to take thyroid medication, right? There's a time when you don't have a thyroid cancer. There's a time and a place for certain medications. Some medications, I would argue, there's never a time and a place. So, but again, being careful here. But the fact is that look, where we go wrong is even if you're taking a medication, you should be looking at taking this medication to ward off certain symptoms because maybe the symptoms are more stressful than what the actual problem became. I don't know, but the fact is that you're just covering a symptom. To use medications for any chronic disease becomes a big problem.
Are they toxic? Do they build up
They
in the
are
cells?
toxic. Of course they're toxic. Look at just Lipitor, cholesterol medications. You tell me why they're causing liver failure because they're toxic, right? You're telling me why they're linked to brain issues from dementia, Alzheimer's, diabetes, right? I mean, these medications have symptoms, they have side effects that people aren't told about. And this tragedy is this. The tragedy is what normal cholesterol was years ago. I think at one point it was 350, then it was 300,
Yep.
then it was 250. And now if you're a 1 point over 200, they want to land you on a cholesterol medication. Yes, it's a billion-dollar industry, and they've become very clever at handing out these toxic medications that have major consequences, even in your joints, right? This isn't my opinion. You can find the studies on this. So if we just say that, yes, these medications are linked to this, many doctors would say, oh, yes, they are. However, they prevent heart attacks. I wish that were true too. However, the Cochrane collaboration, Cochrane looks at groups of studies. Now, what they do that's brilliant is that they'll take, let's say there's 1,000 studies, just to make up a number, that they find on cholesterol and heart disease. They will evaluate those studies and they'll pick the ones that were done appropriately. And then from those studies, they will come up with a conclusion. The conclusions are always that it has very little, if any, to do with heart attacks, meaning cholesterol. It's not so simple. Cholesterol doesn't just float around the blood, it's carried in a little particle. Okay, think of that as like how a car carries people. Well, think about that little particle. The higher it's filled, the higher your total cholesterol or your total LDL would be. So if we have these little particles carrying cholesterol, if it was very filled, we'd say, oh, your cholesterol's high. If they're very empty, we'd say your cholesterol's low. The number of particles, according to study, is what matters, not how filled the particles are. So the question is how relevant is the number of people in cars, like the cholesterol in the particle, in a traffic jam? It's irrelevant. What matters is the number of cars. That's the particles. They're not even measuring the number of particles or the size of the particle because smaller particles are more inflammatory than larger particles. The reality is this: inflammation is the cause of heart disease, not cholesterol. I would argue that cholesterol is one of the most important fats for our cells, for our brain, for our hormones. LDL, the dangerous cholesterol, is at the top of the hormone chain, meaning you have to make all these hormones from it. I'll tell you, if you're a male, I think it is very responsible to try to have a cholesterol level of 250 at least, because your hormone levels are absolutely better. Healthy people have more robust cholesterol levels. That's the truth. So,
if somebody's watching right now and they're asking, what can I do tomorrow to improve my health? Can you give me 1, 2, or 3 different suggestions?
Yeah, look, I mean, as we're on the toxin conversation, avoidance, right? I mean, defragrance your life. And it's not hard. It's easy. Just make sure there's no fragrance in the products you're bringing in. What are you washing your clothes in? Make sure you buy no fragrance, right? Absolutely important. Don't plug plugins in your house or your car or hang them from your rear view mirror. Defragrance your life. Lotions you put on your body, no fragrance. Why fragrance? Because fragrance is protected under IP, which is no one can copy them, right? Intellectual property laws protect them. They're able to put in chemicals in fragrance that have been banned for many years. Cancer causing, known to cause cancer, hormone disrupting, known to cause hormone disruption, and they're allowed to put it in fragrances because of IP laws. So it's therefore one of the most toxic things you can bring in your home.
But not essential oils, right?
Right, essential oils are fine. You want to smell,
because that's a beautiful smell.
Yeah, I'm talking about these man-made fragrances.
Right. Okay. So that's number one. Give me another one.
Like take plastic out of your life the best you can. Don't put hot, acidy food in plastic. Don't drink out of plastic bottles. Use glass or steel. Right. There's alternatives to this. Right. So just de-plastic your life. Those things alone on this, as we talk about slowing down what's coming into the bathtub, you can absolutely control these things, right? Be careful what you put on your skin.
And what about the old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Well, organic apples, yes or no?
Well, okay. There's 2 parts to that because I would argue stay away from your doctor. So if medications are the number one killer, then I would argue, remember when you go to if you ask a carpenter to fix something, he's going to use hammer and nails. Okay, so be very careful there. I would say this, go in emergencies. That's when you go to your doctor. Emergency, go, right? Don't just show up at your doctor's office. That could be very bad. But anyways, the other flip side of that was what? The
The
flip side of
apple,
that,
is an apple good for you?
the
It's got
apple,
pectin
right?
in it.
Okay.
Does it help?
Well, they're spraying it with a chemical called
uh,
glyphosate.
how about an organic apple?
Okay, an organic apple, all right, organic apple could be good. Look, I'm a believer in, really grass-fed, 100%, grass-fed meat, right? That's a real source
I'm with you.
of real nutrition, right? Listen, I'm not opposed to someone eating an apple along the line, but when I watch people feed kids just piles of fruit, that are sprayed, and also, just it's, get some good grass-fed meat, grass-fed butter, or the real foods that our ancestors, our grandparents grew up on. But it's like, and so that brings up another point though, because you asked the question, what can we do? You have to minimize the toxins. We gave some big ones that you can stop right away. Here's another big one. There is a push for the seed oils. Seed oils are bad. Vegetable oil, canola oil. We were told these oils were going to prevent heart disease. We were told that the fat that our grandparents were using was bad. The saturated fats, the cholesterol, the lard, the tallows, right? Those are bad. Those cause heart disease. Start eating these man-made fats, right? These vegetable oils, canola oils, all of them, and we're going to save your life. Okay, it turned out to be, well, of course, our government gave us very bad information. Those things are inflammatory. Get them out of your life. Now, a seed oil could be healthy if it was cold pressed, done right. I made products to fix the cell membrane that have some very important seed oils in them. The seed oils that you're buying in the store, every processed food, they're all absolutely rancid. It's called adulterated, meaning that they come into your cell membranes that I already taught you are so important. Remember, that's where your hormones are, these cell membranes, right? So there's a saying, life and death begins on these membranes. Now, these toxic oils come into that membrane. I used to say it had a half-life of 4 months. Newer studies showing it has a half-life of almost 2 years, meaning they stay in your cells that long, driving inflammation. That's what I told you is blocking hormones. I told you toxins are the number one causative factor there. Arguably, these bad rancid oils are too. We need to get back to grass-fed butter, grass-fed tallow, lard. That's what takes heat. It's stable. These vegetable oils, canola oils, most of the seed oils do not take heat. They're very fragile and they get adulterated. They cause inflammation of your cells, and absolutely you can avoid them Monday. What day is this? I don't know what you're airing this. You can tomorrow. You can literally just avoid seed oils and any processed food, vegetable, canola oil. There, Google it. There's a list.
Dr. Pompa, we could go on for hours. You are a wealth of knowledge and information and a phenomenal communicator of that data as well. We really, really appreciate it. We'll have you back on very, very soon for sure. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Fun stuff, Kevin. Thanks for having me, man.
All righty. Hey, if you like that show, I did another show a while back on a subject similar to this, and I think you're going to love it. So click on the link and watch this other show that I picked out just for you. We're going to be talking about superhuman health, how to live to be 100 with no illness and disease, how, if you're a guy out there, how you can get super big muscles, look lean, and have incredible sexual energy, even if you're 95 years old, how to lose weight,